Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
This guy wrote a book that is helping lots of people. And it's something that happened in his life that changed his life when he was very young, and then realized that this incident created some challenges for him. And he wrote that book. And we're going to talk about the book. It's called Teetering on a Tightrope. And it's a bipolar journey. He's dealt with a bipolar diagnosis for many, many years. How do you navigate that? What does it really mean? What about medication? We're going to answer a lot of those questions courtesy of Steve Wilson, who's back with us. Hi, Steve. How are you?
Good, Steve. How you doing?
I'm great. Great to have you back here. And thank you for last time we got together. And again, this time for your honesty and transparency in talking about what you dealt with, what you are dealing with, and the journey for the book. That there's not a lot of books out there that talk about bipolar diagnosis and how to handle it, whether personally you're dealing with it or whether somebody is dealing with it. This whole thing began, I believe you said you were 9 years old. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Why don't we recap for everybody what's got you here to this point, and then we're going to focus on the medication aspect of bipolar.
All right. When I was a young kid, 8, 7, 9, whatever, I was in great shape. I lived in a very very well-off family. I had no problems, did well in school. Everything was going great. Now, I love movies, and every Saturday we would go to see a double feature at the local theater. And this one Saturday, I went, and after the first movie, I got up to go to the concession stand and get some popcorn and a Coke. And I got my popcorn, cost me all of 15 cents. And I went over to get a Coke, which came in a separate machine. And before I could put in my dime, this person, I have no idea who it was just a random guy, bought my Coke for me. And then he said, I need some help here in the theater. Would you come help me? I said, sure. Being the naive kid I was. And when he started walking, he diverted me into the restroom and sexually assaulted me. He threw me up against a wall. He started choking me. He did his thing. And then that was it. I didn't know why he picked me. I kind of blamed it on myself. I must have looked ripe for the pickings. So I have no idea. And I decided not to tell anybody. Now, back then, this put it into perspective. This was 1958. So back then, I knew nothing about psychiatry, psychiatrists, therapists, anything else. It was in the dark ages back then.
Well, let's even just get it out there that a 9-year-old, 8-year-old today has more knowledge because of the internet than back in 1958. So, and back then you didn't talk about stranger danger and assault and all that kind of stuff. Maybe your parents said, hey, if somebody looks a little odd, stay away from them. But that would be about it. Nobody went into any kind of detail. So
Right.
It's so reasonable to hear you say you didn't know what was going on. You didn't know from anything. And of course, like any other child in that situation, you internalize it and blame yourself. And
Right.
Same thing as a kid who's 7 and their parents got divorced. They're going to many times say the same thing. Well, it's probably because of me that they're not together anymore. And then that sets up for a future of challenges. And that's what happened to you.
Yes. In fact, I decided not to tell anybody, and I didn't for 30 years, and it took all the courage in the world to tell my psychiatrist, and he blew me off. Never even said a word about it. But anyway, with that,
again, different time, because he probably didn't even know how to handle it back then. With somebody who is now, 30 something years old, or let me do the math here. Roughly. You stating what happened, the first thought there, because and in terms of psychiatry, they probably weren't as well versed as they are now, and they probably thought, wow, that was back then. He's probably imagining it. Man, it has nothing to do with now. But we do know that things like that, or any kind of trauma when you're a kid, gets in the way of your life later on.
And that continued me never getting it processed for another, let's see, that was 19, another 20 years. So anyway, going back to what happened after the sexual assault, I was in 4th grade, and I had my first attack of deep depression. And the depression I started experiencing is not like if you had a bad day and you're down for a couple of days and then you snap out of it. It doesn't work that way with real clinical depression. You are down and out. You think you have nothing to live for. Nobody loves you. You don't love anybody else. You don't have feelings about anything. It is pretty damn horrible. And people who've never experienced don't have a clue. So anyway, that bipolar started in 4th grade. It went on through high school, college. And then when I got out of college, I got real bad and started having suicidal ideations. I was a lover of swimming, and I would swim laps every day. And all of a sudden, all I could think about when I was swimming was to kill myself. Let's see, this would be like June 1971. We were having a barbecue at my folks' house. I got in a fight with my dad, who I never got along with. And the next thing I knew, I was in a mental hospital and stayed there for 3 weeks. They diagnosed me as clinically depressed, gave me all kinds of medications, of which there were very few back then. Let's put it in perspective. This is 1970. And nothing worked. For the next 6 or 8 years, I was in terrible shape. I lost all kinds of jobs. I couldn't do anything. It was awful. And in 1978, my psychiatrist came into my session and said, "Steve, I think I made a mistake on your diagnosis. You're bipolar." I said, "What the hell is bipolar?" And he told me. At that time, most people called it manic depression, meaning you go from deep depression, you get out of that, and then you go into the high state of mania where you're out of control. Well, he gave me lithium as a drug. It worked very well, and I got about 50% better, and I was able to rejoin the human race. Since then, it's been going pretty well. Took 20 years to find the real cocktail I needed, which is a random set of drugs that works for me. It might not work for anybody else, but I got that last piece in 2000. I've been very good since.
Wow. I want to jump in because we're focusing more on medication today, but that prescription came 23 years ago and you haven't changed it?
No, that's not true.
Okay.
I got from the lithium, I got a bad kidney. It destroyed my kidney. In fact, 2 years ago, I had a kidney transplant.
Wow.
So they had to change me in about 2000 from lithium to lamictal. It was just as good as the lithium. So I had no changes. And then that same year, they switched. They didn't switch. They added Paxil. Since then, I have been real good. I have rumination still, but not a lot of it, which is an out of control mind. It hits every once in a while, but I'm in pretty damn good shape.
Wow. How do you sleep? How's your sleep?
Well, my sleep started getting to be bad in high school. And then it was terrible all through that part of night when I went into the hospital and after. And when I got lithium, it got a lot better. Over the years, probably because more of age than anything else, my sleep pattern is pretty good to fair to poor. It just rambles all over the place. And right now I'm sleeping very well. But they say that if you don't get proper sleep, everything with your mental illness just goes kilter. So it's very important that you get a lot of sleep.
Even if you don't have, and I actually, but I do question. I think many of us have some mental challenges from time to time. But if things are mostly okay, not getting enough sleep, you can't function. There's just it's just not doable. So that's why I asked you. I was kind of curious if, if you racing thoughts come up at night. Well, I'm glad to hear that the medication, you found the right cocktail, the right combo, and it's working for you. What would you say to people that may have a bipolar diagnosis or are going through some mental challenges about medication?
Well, with medication with mental illness, it's a crapshoot. There is no specific medication that's going to fix you. It's just whatever the hell works for you.
Yep.
For me, I was very lucky. Even though it took all those years, I was able to function the whole time, had a good life, raised a family, finally got a decent job. Things have gone well. And that's how everybody has to do the medication. I don't sponsor any medication, separate any name brand or anything like that. It doesn't do any good because it may not work for you.
100%. Yeah.
All I talk about is medication as a medication, not saying what it is. There are a lot of problems with medication, but it usually stems from the patient themselves. They have a negative feeling about going on any type of medication, so they refuse to take it. Or they will start a medication and the doctor always says, now this will take a month or two to start working. So they take this medication, a couple of weeks, it isn't working. So they decide, well, hell, it isn't going to work for me. So they throw it away and maybe not go back to the psychiatrist.
Yep.
Then there's the guy or girl who goes on, they find a medication that works for them. They start feeling really good. And you know what they do? They say, I don't need this medication anymore. They throw it away. And the next thing you know, they're down and out again.
Or it has a side effect. And in the beginning, they were tolerating the side effect because they want to feel better. I'm feeling better. I don't need it anymore. Still got that side effect. So I'm going to toss that away. It's so interesting. I'm intrigued about different medications. And I talk with friends about this a lot. Even antidepressants. I have friends that can't take them. And they've tried all of them. And then they pivoted over to mood stabilizer.
Yes.
And that seems to get the job done. And some of them, antidepressants, make them more depressed.
That is true. And I don't want anyone to get the thought that if they switch over to a
Mood stabilizer.
that they're going to be better, because it's not work.
100%. It's all about your chemistry, your
Right.
DNA. I think I mentioned last time you can take a DNA test, just a swab on your cheek, to see what antidepressants may work for you and may not. Is it an exact science? No. In my experience of talking to people and seeing what came back on the test and what medication doesn't work for them, seems pretty accurate. You know, some doctors will say, it's all bunk. Others will say, hey, it's a tool. Let's take a look at it.
Wow.
You know, mostly insurances cover it. Some don't, but there's one company I'm not endorsing. It's called Gene Sight, and they will, no matter what, you never pay more than $300 for this test. Whether your insurance company pays for it or not, you're never going to pay more than $300. And you know what? I think it's worth it. You know, in my experience of seeing,
it is worth it. I facilitate 2 support groups here in Phoenix, have done it for 8 years.
Mhm.
And several of my members have taken that test.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And have tried it. Mixed results.
Yep.
I've had a couple who've found the right drug or got help because of that. But I've also found the same number who didn't get any relief at all.
Not an exact science, but I feel based on what I've seen, if it's in the no column or the questionable column, people have told me that, yeah, wow, those are the ones that don't work for me. So if you've got a list of these drugs and these here that come up in the test that say, you might not want to go there, I'd pivot over to these over here over those. Why not? You know, what's the difference between a Paxil and a Wellbutrin? Or, you know,
Yeah.
if it's apples to apples, so to speak, if it's I'm not a doctor, SSI, you know, type drug, or I think that's what it is. Why not try these over here?
Yeah, true. Well, I will tell you that medication only helps about 50% of the people.
Is this for bipolar?
This is for mental illness.
Okay.
Bipolar, which is included. The 2 I think of most are depression and bipolar, but I've got people in my group who are schizophrenic. They suffer and suffer and suffer and try and try and try. But 50%, that's it. So if you're unlucky enough to be one of those in the 50% column that it doesn't help, there are other resources that you can tap into that will at least help. Will they cure you? No, there is no cure for bipolar. There is no cure for clinical depression. But there are some things that you can do, and some of them you can do on your own. I think that the ones that help the most, you have to get a little help with, so you know how to do them and you can dive into them. A couple of them I will tell you about. There's CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. There's DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. There's intensive outpatient therapy. And there's EMDR, which is eye movement therapy.
Mm-hmm.
There is ketamine, which is an infusion. And I have a couple people in my groups who use it. It is not an answer, but it is a big help, maybe. Some people respond favorably to it. It's pretty damn expensive. Yeah. But I have one girl who it has virtually saved her life, but she has to do it every 2 months. So, and it's about $500 a shot. So that one a lot of people can't afford.
And I'm sure because it's not, mainstream practice, insurance companies don't pay for that.
Well, don't get me set on that insurance stuff.
Well, we went down that road last time, and we
Yeah.
both triggered each other. You want? Steve triggered a Steve. I just got off the phone. I just got off the phone with the insurance company because I wanted to get an MRI on my arm because I might have a rotator cuff issue. I got a little bit of pain, and doctor sent it in. Sounded like it was approved. Made an appointment. Waited a week and a half, and the company, the center that does the MRI, called me. I'm like, oh, but no, we can't do it. I'm supposed to be doing it this morning. Can't do it. It got denied. I'm denied. You guys made an appointment. How could you make an appointment? I assume that you had the approval. Nope. So called doctor back, and now it's a X-ray and I don't know, sonogram or something. I don't know. Just a horrible, horrible system. And might I add, I pay almost $800 a month for my own insurance, not including the copays.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. Unbelievable.
It's ridiculous. And we're not going to get into this again, but I'll just leave it with one thing. Take how bad insurance is for physical ailments.
Yeah.
Multiply it by 10 for mental.
Yep.
There is the insurance companies just don't want to do it. So we let them have their way and we all suffer.
Yep. And the system, the number of providers on the mental side, so overtaxed, overworked, and they have to churn people in and churn them out because the insurance companies don't pay enough. So that means the quality of care is not as good as it could be. Private providers where you pay separately, good. I'm dealing with this, friends, family. I've seen psychiatrists get on a virtual call for 6 minutes if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And they're prescribing the medication. Are they really listening to what the patient has to say and what they're feeling that, day, week, month, whatever? I don't know about that. Okay, my rant is over.
Okay, good, because it was less than last week.
Well, yeah, and that's with a denial. I just got I got another denial the other day. I'm not even gonna go there. Your book talks about your journey. Where else does it go when we get to toward the end of the book? Is there suggestions that people can use that we're, things that we're talking about right now?
Yes. The last part of the book deals with basically two things: my groups, and what I've learned from them, and how they have been able to navigate their own lives, good and bad. And my people start out at around 18 and go to my age, which is 75. So there's quite a broad range of people. And these people are mainly the people that can't get help elsewhere, or they struggle to get help. They're in the system, and the system is really bad. So they turn to groups. Groups are probably the best thing for them, but it still isn't good. So I thought I'd take a minute and tell you, not specifically, but some of the things that people have gone through in their lives, and they come out of it suffering badly for years and years and years, and maybe never get over it, or maybe they're lucky like I have been and things work out. I have a young lady in my group. She's about 50. And her father was a drug dealer. And they lived in a commune. And he gave his daughter drugs at a very young age. And he also passed her around in her teens to other men in the commune. I met her when I would say 6 or 8 years ago when she first came to my group. And she was probably the first one that I realized how bad the results can be from when you suffer through that at a young age. And maybe it starts when you're 20. Who knows? Mm. She's one of those on ketamine. She's one of those who's tried everything. And if one procedure works, great. She was doing very well on ketamine, and then she had a psychotic breakdown during her treatment and went out of control. She suffered things that you and I can't even think about. Another story is about a young lady.
I don't mean to cut you off, but they're going to cut us off. I just realized that we're just about out of time.
Okay, let me get a quick more stories. I'll shorten them. I've had women who have been kidnapped, sent into trafficking, and there are 2, I think, in my group who've done this, and they escaped or were saved, and they're now dealing with the consequences. I've had one woman was kidnapped, but not trafficked or anything. She was held in a cage for a long time until she escaped. I have a guy whose young infant, just born, died very quickly. His wife killed herself after the incident. He became so mentally distraught that every evening he sits in his closet at bedtime with a baseball bat, waiting for someone to come and get him. So these are some of the things that go on in this world. And I really want to point that out because 20% of the people in the world are mentally ill some way. And a lot of it is because of what is perpetrated on them by a family member, a cousin, best friend of the family, or like me, strangers. And it's rampant.
I'm so happy you're saying that because that's the aha moment here. Many people don't realize that. Many people just think, well, they're just mentally ill. No, there can be a reason for it, a trauma that they suffered that sent them in that direction. And as you describe it, and a lot of these other people, I think we need to take note of that. And nobody talks about that. We just look at it. They're mentally ill. No, they were born that way. Genetics. A lot of times they'll ask you, anybody in your family mentally ill? Okay, that can have a bearing. I do know people that friends who have others in their family that have challenges, but it doesn't have to be. Your website, please share it so we can learn more about your story and also and find your book.
The name of the book is Teetering on a Tightrope, My Bipolar Journey. The address is Steve W. Wilson. No, it's author, AUTHOR, SteveWWilson.com.
Thank you so much for being here again and sharing your story, your life with others to inspire, to help. Something's making me say this. Have you thought about or started a Facebook group?
I have not. I am spending most of my time on doing podcasts because they're the best way to get the word out. I didn't write this book to make any money. I wrote this book to try to get the word out.
Sure.
I tell you, it's very challenging to get people to even consider listening to a podcast about mental illness.
I totally got you there. Yeah. Not the most entertaining subject. Yeah,
I don't know how many listeners you normally have, but you'll be lucky to get a few. Listen to this.
People, especially because there's not a lot out there, will search and find. And that's where podcasts like this come up.
Yes.
With a search, because they're searching for help. They're searching for answers. And there's lots of podcasts. There's millions and millions, not millions and millions about bipolar. So for that, I appreciate you being here. And again, your honesty and transparency. We gotta change the view, but also help people at the same time. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Enjoyed it.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.